I'm going to talk about say no to say yes, craft a meaningful research life, integrate research with pedagogy, service, and other professional areas, publish and persevere, controlled connectivity, and welcoming others. And I want to start this section with this quote by Richard Bach: "You teach best what you most need to know." And this idea of staying renewed has been a struggle across my entire career. I have a very busy home life, as I'm sure you do also, and then a very demanding professional life. And how do I balance that at any time? And I would say, towards the latter end of my career now, in my mid 50s, I've really learned that the idea that works best for me is to know that I probably won't achieve balance. So that any given time, such as when I'm at the end of a semester and ending grading, the balance goes towards my professionality and then it will swing back to my family. And so what I've really worked with is to become comfortable with not having balance. And so I always am teaching how to stay renewed because it is something I need to understand. And so this is definitely not from the position of an expert. So the first idea I want us to think about is say no to say yes. And so this doesn't mean that I'm advocating that you say no to responsibilities that we would consider to be in the description of your role at the university or institution you work at, or that would be contractual, let's say. But how to say no to things that are becoming too much, too many requests. We can become known as a person that will always say yes. And then particularly if you have any I'm losing my words, sorry. Any identities that the university is lacking or really needs, you can be asked to do things too much. So let's say that you're um, an Indigenous American professor, you can start to find that you're being asked to be on every committee that needs something with diversity or indigenous issues. I'll give you a very simple example. For many, many years, I was a co-chair of the IRB. And the federal government asks that we try to have IRB board members who hold diverse racial and ethnic positionalities. And I think we can understand why this is quite important. But if you're at a university that doesn't have a lot of people with that way, the same person can get re-asked and re-asked to be on this committee along with other committees where we would also like to have a diverse perspective. Of course, the overall situation is that there would be many, many people with diverse identities, and we know higher education struggles in this area. So say no, be gracious, but be unequivocal. Don't say, well, I might this, say no, I won't be able to do this. And to any kind of request that's extra or will stress or overload you. And when you can say no, then you are saying yes to you. You're saying yes to families and friends. You're saying yes to drifting. This idea of drifting is when we're able to disconnect completely, and it's when some of our most amazing scholarship ideas will boom up. For some, it might be for taking a run. For others, it might be getting outside, going to a concert, a library. I would say typically by disconnecting, I do mean away from technology. I think that will make me sound out of touch somewhat, but I find that if we binge watch a lot of TV or something like that, a lot of streaming a show, it can become where we're almost tired when we come out of it. And so I'm thinking about ways that you can connect with nature or with family and friends, pets, and it becomes renewing. So this is this idea of drifting. We can't always be in a work mode. Then, as I said, become comfortable with not being able to balance everything. Berkman talks about this: embrace a life of limit. You won't have all the time to do what you want to do, he says. So, what do you want to do? Embrace rather than deny temporal limitations. Then crafting a meaningful research life. I think this was the most important thing that happened to me kind of in the latter part of my early career, where I realized that, and I wish someone had tipped me off as a student, that I should figure out if I could integrate my research with my pedagogy, service, and other professional areas. And so for me, as I said, I had been a chair of the IRB for quite a while, And I was kind of starting to become resentful of it because even though I think the university has always really valued my position, some individuals take when you are assessing what the federal government has required as though you're saying it. And so it can become this idea of the idiom shoot the messenger, and it can be really annoying at times. And so I found that I was able to take all this knowledge I had about research ethics and the things that I didn't like about how the United States does institutional research ethics, because sometimes it seems like we're trying to cover ourselves and protect ourselves instead of it's really actually supposed to be about protecting the research participants. And I was able to create a course at the university that we take on research ethics. I was able to create an article on culturally responsive research ethics that then grew into a book on culturally responsive research ethics, and then also a course that I created for SAGE that people can take virtually, like this course on culturally responsive research ethics. And so you see that this bloomed over time where my research, my pedagogy, service, and other professional areas all became integrated. And I think about this as another colleague at the university where they research different ways of teaching things through educational psychology, but they also give presentations and their services in the area as such as things as how can we use AI to be more effective professors? And so this person has been able to integrate their research area with their pedagogy and their service. And I would say this is the number one way to free up time while at the same time starting to develop an expertise, and you stay renewed because this is your passion area, your interest area. And this, you might stumble on it, you might craft it deliberately, and I do understand that it's not always possible for everybody. So maybe we consider it a achieved ideal. Then we need to take the idea of, it's a really negative phrase, publish or perish. We need to reclaim that and change that and say, no, I'm going to figure out how to publish. I personally have worked on trying to make the publication process for qualitative researchers very transparent through my writing. And I have a textbook on how do you write qualitative research. It covers areas from dissertations to articles to artistic pieces such as research poetry, and say we need to reclaim this and say we're going to publish and persevere. So as the ones of us that understand how to publish, we want to make sure that we're ushering other people into this and not making it intimidating. Within this, a huge piece is protecting your writing time. For many of us, that might even include needing to turn off Wi-Fi or go out into a space such as a library where people don't know us, or nature somewhere, and be able to write without intrusion. Very seriously, I have written entire manuscripts and a book chapter in my car away from Wi-Fi, waiting to go pick my children up. And people laugh when I say that sometimes, but a lot of people's lives is shuttling children and grandchildren from place to place. And we can use that time very valuably rather than the temptation I would have, of course, of scrolling my phone and looking at what awful thing is going on that day. And then instructors could consider writing with course members. So you could develop a very loose contract, if you will. I'm kind of saying air quote. And people will say, okay, these people will work on the literature review. These people will work on the empirical research. These people will submit the IRB, and you can write a paper together. And then you could create a writing team, students to students that are listening, with other productive students, and do research on your own, of course, outside of the courses. And these are all ideas towards crafting a meaningful research life. If we did any of this at one time, it's too much. So I'm describing things that could occur over years. And then I think increasingly we need to really control connectivity. I was quite influenced by a author early in my career who said that they never even worked on a computer that had connectivity. Now, I think that would be much harder for us now because we can certainly turn it off, but then we also know that we can be the one to turn it on. But this idea of something's interrupting our deep thought process at all times with alerts and notifications, my preference is to have my writing block set that nothing can contact me. And let's say I'm going to write for 4 hours. That doesn't mean that I won't check, because I do want to be sure that my children are safe and that maybe no emergency is happening. But I'll do a 50-minute block of writing. Then I'll get up, move around, check my text really quickly, and then move back into that. And so how can we control the connectivity where it's working for us instead of eroding us? Within this, limit meetings when possible, and when you meet, require that there would be a loose agenda ahead of time. Keep the meeting short. Discourage the heavy use of devices unless you're researching something that you need internet connections for. Encourage participation in the meeting. Participants, of course, need a way to be heard and considered, and avoid having meetings just to update people. So much of what happens could be sent out in some kind of email email, like a memo, if you will, and we don't need to necessarily just meet to update people. Our time is very valuable. Create connectivity-free time, limit, mute, or cancel altogether notifications. I've already went over this. I think I flipped here, but we are the ones who choose when to connect. Don't allow apps, websites, etc. to dictate. Set a block of time or day for no internet connectivity. And then I talked about turning off Wi-Fi. Welcome others. This always makes me think about my mom, and I have a picture from uh, a picture book that she gave each of her children when we were adults with one of her favorite songs. And the quote from the song is, "All God's critters, so all God's creatures, all God's critters got a place in the choir. Some sing low and some sing higher." And so it's this idea that there should be inclusion among everybody. And we can apply this, I think, to higher education. And we can think about, well, who's new? Faculty, students, staff, guests, and how might we welcome them? So we're already there, we're established. How can we be welcoming? What identities are not reflected in the spaces you are in? Why might this be? And what can you do about it? Are diverse identities reflected in your curriculum, texts, readings, in your virtual self, that how you represent yourself in the world, greetings that you create? Let's say you have a video that's a greeting that you post. Are diverse identities reflected in it, or is it mostly white dominant type of identities? Are diverse perspectives welcomed in your space? And I would say this would even include ones you don't agree with at all, ones that sometimes can feel unpopular in higher ed. And so this can feel uncomfortable for us. So we want to have a space where different people can have different perspectives within higher ed. Consult with people from diverse identities about these issues when possible, and if possible, pay them, because this is another thing we know, that we pull very hard on people that have different perspectives, and it's considered almost like a free contribution that they would have to give to us to help improve the world for their people, if you will. And then what this does is it causes a great level of fatigue and exhaustion to always be the one that's having to train everybody else. So we need to do a lot of work ourselves, and we need to see if we can give compensation to people when possible. Considering welcome others, continuing to consider that. Welcome does begin with a greeting, but truly it's much deeper. Being welcoming includes relationship and listening, discovering what people have to contribute from their cultural assets, and incorporating this into the current culture. Making research, writing, and publication process and its expectations transparent. So some groups have created these expectations, and it's very clear to them what they are. We must make these transparent to other groups so that everybody can participate, because this in higher education is the thing that allows someone to stay across a career or they need to leave. This is one of the huge steps between those two areas. We need to make tenure and the promotion process and expectations transparent. Reach out and engage with people, make sure they understand what this expectation is and how many years of work might move towards that. This is not a quick or last minute thing. We need to clearly detail what an academic career may entail. And so when we're working with people as a student and they're making choices if they want to go to grad school, they need to understand this. One thing I think about is a business student had come back and was just appalled when they realized what a professor's salary was at the university she was at. And so she made much more as a business person with an undergraduate degree. That, everything we do is not necessarily about money, but higher ed brings a lot of compensation in other areas. But we need to be very clear that our students understand what all the career entails. We should also model saying no, disconnecting, allowing time for drifting while being a productive member of the academic community. And I was realizing that sometimes when I talk about this topic, I do talk about another thing I think um, faculty and scholars should talk about more, and that's mental health. So one of the reasons I've always been interested in renewal is I struggle with what I would consider such situational depression. It's not chronic and ongoing, but I need to be careful if I get too overloaded, if I'm reading very, very heavy research. So a research supervisor such as myself, we supervise a lot of heavy topic areas that are important and people are studying. And this really started cropping up when early in my career I lost a pregnancy and had quite a difficult time with depression at that time. And so I think when we talk about being renewed, we don't want to hide those kind of issues also because it's something many of us have difficulty with at time. And how can we have ups and downs across our career and be supported through those lower times? So this includes asking how others are doing. If they're having a really difficult time, we might simply say, would you like to talk right now or would you prefer to be left alone? And I can check back in another day. And this is a habit of mine that I've grown into. And I've had people certainly say, no, I don't want to talk about it at all. And I've had other people that really wanted to talk a lot. And I've had someone say, come back and check with me some other time. And so I think this leaves a lot of space, and you have to be intrepid to step up and say that, but we need to value each other as colleagues and researchers so that we can stay renewed. You can move through your spaces with plenty of time so you can greet, check in, and consult with others as warranted. Sometimes we're always in a rush everywhere we go, and we forget relational aspects with that. Sometimes we do have to legitimately be in a rush. I can think about someone who stopped me, and unfortunately, I was running late to pick up my child from school. So I said, is there any way you can walk with me as we leave at the building? And that's a little bit, I can see that sounds demanding, and then also trying to set a time that we can circle back and get to what they need. So I'm not saying we'll always be able to have the time to be gracious and move slower through our spaces, but it can be a goal. If you're responsible for people, do check in with them very deliberately. And I think about the first chair of my department that hired me years ago. And he made an effort that I realized after working with him for several months to take a moment and drop into each professor's office and chat with them for a while. And so I asked him later in my career, and he said, yes, it was very deliberate. It wasn't just something, that I had kind of noticed. And I know in these virtual times that might be harder, but my current chair, he does not necessarily see me all the time. We might do email or talk on the phone, but he ends almost every other email or phone call with just saying, I want you to know how much I appreciate you. So there's other ways that we can do that kind of showing welcome and connection. And then watch for people you're not responsible for and supervisors who seem like they may need support. So we don't want people to feel isolated, and ask, how can you help? Ask recent community members what made them or makes them currently feel welcome. So what makes you feel welcome doesn't necessarily make someone else feel welcome. So for example, some people might like a big hug and someone else would not like that at all. And so we want to check in about things like that, not just assume that that the same thing that makes us feel welcome will make them feel welcome. And then a very important piece of this is provide plans for others to be able to say no, be the bad guy for them. And so frequently with professors that don't have tenure, I'll say just tell the people when they ask you, I need to check back with my faculty and see if this is a good thing for me to do. And that gives them space to move away and get advice, and then they can graciously decline projects that would seemingly um, suck up their time in ways that aren't profitable to them and supportive of them as early career people, and choose ones that would be more enriching and beneficial. So I end, as I've had through this course and the last course, with a set of reflexive questions. So you can pause the slideshow now or pause the recording now or take a screenshot and either write about some of these questions now or later. There's many questions. I provided many, so I think you could really do them as journal entries over the course of several weeks. I wouldn't suggest all of them right now. But the first is considering back to the beginning of the talk, the quality of cultural humility. What about this quality resonates with you or feels unfamiliar? Why or why not? Does it resonate with you? What impact might cultural humility have on the research you conduct? Crafting culturally responsive research. How might you adapt the traditional literature review that you are working with to the kind of research you do? How might collaborative research work for you or does work for you currently in the research you do? Thinking about staying renewed in research, what are the top ways you become depleted in your life? What are the top ways you experience renewal? What can you say no to this week now in order to say yes to yourself? How have you been welcoming in academia in ways that are impactful? How might you encourage renewal in those you're responsible for or colleagues? And then thinking about the methodological exemplars, how might you integrate research methodology with your cultural identities and the cultural identities of the people you conduct research with? References and resources.